So I've been seeing a lot of memes going around the internet how the Las Vegas Grand Prix track layout looks like Spider Pig, up the pig that's upside down in The Simpsons walking on the ceiling. And it really does. It's spot on.
It's either that or refer back to our preview when you had, I think, a better analogy, which was ask a child to draw an upside down cartoon bear.
With his feet up in the air.
But that's where we're racing.
All right.
Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
This is the Las Vegas Grand Prix preview. We're your Turn 1 hosts, Jeremiah.
And Thomas.
Thomas, I want to talk about the track layout and kind of how this thing is shaped, because we already mentioned it looks like Spider Pig. It looks like a third grader drew a bear upside down, feet in the air.
Winnie the Pooh eating out of his honey pot on his back.
Right. But I want to get more in depth about this. We're looking at 17 corners. They've altered it a couple times. So turn 6 through 9 was originally going to be this big winding loop, and now they've added a chicane up in the top. I like that because it does add more cornering. It does add more action.
They so succumb to peer pressure because whenever they released the initial renderings of the Las Vegas Formula One track, it was spit on by the entire F1 community, right? Am I wrong?
Well, it's terrible.
I mean, and to be fair, we don't know if it's terrible yet. We could be proven wrong. What if it's a great race? What if there's tons of action? What if the drivers find areas to overtake? But as we get in through this review, we're going to talk a little bit about the weather, a little bit about the track, the grip surface and all that. But Jeremiah's right. When this track was first released, it was not well put together, so much so that they went back to the drawing board because of peer pressure, and they said, let's add 2 more turns for a total of, what, 14 turns?
17 in total. It was 14. So let's talk about some of the defining features. Like we mentioned, 17 turns. The entire track itself is going to be 3.85 miles, or for our European fans, 6.2 kilometers. 50 laps in total is how many laps they're planning for this race. So I mean, a decent amount. It's not like it's going to be 71, but it's also not one of the smaller tracks.
I'm kind of surprised. So you say 3.5 miles or so, which falls kind of in the mid to higher range of track lengths.
Right.
But when you look at the speed of the track, I would think that they'd be flying through these laps.
Well, I mean, they are, especially because one of the next points that I was going to hit is that the longest strip on this track is going to be the Las Vegas strip, where they go on to Las Vegas Boulevard. It's 1.181 miles, and it's flat out. So that's going to be sweet. We're going to get hints of Azerbaijan straight. We're going to get hints of Monza. It's going to be cool. The drivers are going to be bringing their lower downforce packages because they don't really need all of that. So you are going to see like the Monza specs, the Imola specs. And so we're going to see top speeds going down these straights.
It could almost be Monza spec because also you're going in a right-hand turn motion, right? Similar to Monza. So I bet the teams are running that as like their simulation package and then deviating from that. But it's pure speed package.
I'll lay out some of the cool turns here. First of all, turn 1 is going to be a hairpin. And we love a good hairpin for turn 1 because we always see good action. And of course, when we go to the recap and it's my time to shine with the turn 1 diagnostics, I will definitely be paying attention.
So here's the only thing. And I misspoke. It's not actually a right-hand turn. It's a left-hand turn track.
It's counterclockwise.
For some reason, I thought that they went down to the Vegas Strip, but no, they don't. They come around the spear the other way. It's going to be a good turn 1, but it's awfully short, the lead up to turn 1.
Yeah, they start, if you look, the whole straight behind this finish line, and the start-finish line is like a massive straight, but they're starting right at the very end of it. So basically, they're going to have like, I don't know, a couple meters to play with, and then it's going to immediately go into a hairpin.
So kind of Singapore-ish.
Right. Or, I mean, I was going to say Austin because Austin's a hairpin, but there's a long lead up to that first hairpin.
The reason I'm saying Singapore is because it is a very short little straight section that they squeeze the grid into. And then whenever they go into turn one, it is a turn that it's not a hairpin, but it does come back on itself a little bit. And so really you have two different sets of drivers. You have and we're going to be comparing a lot to other races because there hasn't been a Vegas Grand Prix on this track. We referenced the 1980 Caesar Palace Grand Prix, completely different track. So this is all new for everybody. But when you look at the Singapore Grand Prix, you have the driver that's on the inside line, which is the favorable line because you can hit the apex a little bit better.
Right.
But there's the other set of drivers that if you can get enough room to the outside and you have an opening on that inside lane, you can go way faster through the turn so long as you have the room to do so.
Or if you can even swing super wide, you can carry more speed on the outside line and possibly even get right upside the people who have to slow down dramatically to hit the hairpin.
You just can't do that if there's a whole line of cars on the inside because then there's nowhere for you to come back in.
Right. So we talked about turn one. We'll move to turn 6 through 9. This goes around the MSG sphere, which is the Madison Square Garden sphere. Brand new thing to Las Vegas. It's super cool because the entire outside of it is lined in these LEDs. So they can put essentially any image that they want, even if it's a moving image. I watched a couple of the track layout YouTube videos where they were kind of going over the construction process and everything. And they had fun bits up there, like a smiley face with the eyes following traffic, and it would just rotate and go look over here and go look over there. I thought that was hilarious. So I hope we do see something like that during the race.
So here's Las Vegas is a spectacle, right? So, Max Verstappen was interviewed and he said that we're going there more for the spectacle than the actual race.
Right.
And he said, I don't really care for that, but I'm going to go there, get the job done, and leave or whatever. The views from down the strip are going to be awesome. You're going to see the Paris Hotel, the fake Eiffel Tower, maybe the Bellagio fountains, even though they're kind of covered up by grandstands.
Right.
But the sphere, I think, is going to be the visual centerpiece of the track.
Oh, sure.
Because as we heard, F1 has full control over the sphere's graphics for this race. So there's no telling. I mean, there's going to be some kind of pre-race show on the sphere. There has to be. And then during the race, I'm sure that they're not going to get something that's overly distracting, but there's going to be something that's visually appealing for an F1 audience. Maybe it's funny, maybe it's F1 focused, maybe it changes. We'll see. I'm
wondering if it's going to be like an onboard, or if maybe they might do a track camera so you can see the cars zipping by, something like that. I mean, that would be, they have so many options that they could play with here.
And it's not going to be, I mean, I would be surprised if it was the same thing for a full hour and a half, 2 hour race. It's going to be changing constantly, and they're going to constantly showing shots of it. And I do think that's cool. We can talk a lot of mess about Las Vegas and how this is kind of poorly prepared, which we'll get into, but I'm really glad they got the sphere done because there was worries for a long time that sphere was not getting done.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool. We'll move on from there.
Real quick, sorry.
Go ahead.
And they added the chicaner on the sphere, so we're going to have it on screen even more. And I wonder if when they were getting under that peer pressure of the track being bad, they're like, all right, well, the sphere is going to be done. Let's make them hang around there a little bit longer.
Yeah, just, let's get as much airtime on this sphere as humanly possible.
Not so much on the haphazard grandstands that we made over a street.
So moving on from that section, they go down turns 10, 11, 12, and 13. We get to 14, or the end of 13, where we're going into the main straight. Or I'm sorry, I think it's 12 because they count a little bend down the main straight as turn 13.
We've always had our confusion about why turn 1 considers some things turns and some things not turns. It's not a straight section between between turn 12 and 14. There's a bend similar to Baku, like you mentioned, how the first leg of the Baku-Azerbaijan straightaway is rounding a curve, and then it enters a straightaway. This is very much similar in that out of turn 12, you have a slight bend, but it's going to be flat out. And the DRS detection zone, here's the other thing that's kind of weird. The DRS detection zone is just after turn 13, so they're not going to have their wing open for that whole time.
For the entirety of the straight?
It's only less than 2/3, a little over a half.
So again, just like Baku, in a sense, where the entirety of that long flat out section isn't DRS.
There's another track that does that too, where the last section isn't a full DRS section, and it's really confusing. Mexico. The Mexico straightaway is only like half of a DRS section, even though it's all straight.
And I don't know. I don't know why they do stuff like that. Maybe it has something to do with like they don't want to get to unsafe speeds.
There's too much of an advantage if you give it to them for a mile.
Oh, well, that's true too, because then at least they have a fighting chance if they get a good exit that they can fight you off for the first section of the straight.
You can still defend.
Yeah. Okay, then that would make sense. So like I said, though, coming out of turn 12, you have this super long 1.181 miles straight. That's all flat out. You have the slight bend at turn 13. And turn 14 at the end of the straight is where everybody is saying, from what my records are showing, from all those different articles and stuff I've been reading, that's where you're going to see the majority of the overtakes, which that makes sense.
Turn 14?
Right.
Yeah.
Because everybody's flying down the straight and then either dive bombing or going around at the last second as they're getting to the end of the straight. It's going to be a great track for people who have cars that naturally have that high end speed. So Ferrari, we're going to see Williams, they're going to have great races here just because I mean, anytime that we go to a track and there's a long straight, we always hear about how the Williams high end speed is just unmatched, and it's going to be good. It's going to be good.
I think your overtaking spots are going to be, I'll start at I don't think turn 1 is actually going to be a great overtaking spot only because of the turn 17 bend.
Yeah.
I think that's too much of a distraction to get people enough time to overtake. But I think coming into turn 5, so between turn 4 and turn 5 is your first DRS zone, and it's a sharp right turn, a right angle turn at turn 5. I think that's a good overtaking spot. You can dive bomb a corner. Possibly turn 7 too. So if you look between turns 6 and 7, there's a slight bend to the left. Right. I think there could be some jockeying for inside-outside lines there.
Oh, as you go into the chicane.
As you go into the chicane, and somebody could take advantage of that. I don't see turn 12 as an overtaking spot. So really, I'm looking at 14, 5, and maybe 7.
Which rightfully so. We have other tracks out there on the F1 calendar where there's only like 1 or 2 overtaking spots, so it's not like it's something that's foreign.
I mean, Monza, turn 1 is pretty much it.
That's a nasty chicane, though.
It is, but that's kind of the only spot because you come off of a DRS straight.
And if you get the inside line.
There's one other chicane, I think, in Monza, but it's not great for overtaking, so...
I could see that. We'll talk about a little bit. I mean, I say track history here, but remember, this is the first time that we're ever coming to this track. So really, it's more like the Las Vegas itself in the history.
We're going to compare it to the first time every other track was ran.
No.
All right, starting with Bahrain.
Right. No. We talked about in a previous video, which if you haven't seen, you should go check it out. We talk about the 1981 and 1982 Las Vegas Grand Prix. We covered that in good detail. Right. So... we have history in Las Vegas itself, but that was in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace, and they have completely overdid it now. The race is at night. They got all the lights, the spectacle, and it's no longer in a parking lot of the Caesar's Palace.
So here's what I think the difference was. Coming to Vegas in 2023, everyone knows it's about the spectacle of the visual that is Vegas.
Right.
Because now Formula One is very much a TV sport, as well as I don't know how many fans. I don't think they're going to fit 400,000 fans in there like they do like Austin.
Right.
But 200,000 to 300,000 fans over the course of a weekend just due to the space constraints. It's for the spectacle. When they went to Vegas in the 80s, it was more of a destination for people that were there to say, oh, there's a Formula One race here. Oh, let's go check it out. Let's go look at it. And the drivers possibly, stayed at some hotels, did whatever they were going to do in Vegas, but it wasn't for the TV visual because that wasn't a big American thing at the time. We've talked about the Formula One buildup in the United States, and it wasn't until really COTA became a permanent fixture on the track that Formula One took hold as a TV market in the US.
Because now they're going past the Bellagio fountains. They're going past, they built this big sphere. Obviously, they didn't build it for the F1 track, but they definitely fast-tracked it so that it would get done on time. And it goes through all these other historic landmarkers. I mean, it goes straight down the Strip. And the Strip is the spot in Vegas that is most known as the most toured section of Vegas. I mean, that's where all the spectacle is.
And the 80s track was, again, kind of thrown up overnight because they said, oh, let's have a race in Vegas. Let's get this done. Okay, here's some land that we can quickly put a track on.
We watched a video that said something like 40 days they built that
40
track.
days. And it was originally the Caesar's Palace Grand Prix track was a temporary track that they were going to see if it took hold, like if it became a legit thing. And then they were going to make an actual racing facility. Now, there is a Las Vegas Motorsports, but it's not suited to F1 racing.
No.
So the reason that the 80s thing didn't take hold is because they didn't center it around the spectacle of Vegas because they didn't have the TV market that they have today. The only issue I could see with today's track is that they might need to tweak the track after year one a little bit to make it more about the racing. Once you get the fans in, the fans aren't just going to stay because of the visuals. You stay because of the product, the racing action. Right. And so we'll see how this track is. Maybe this is a pilot year. We know we have at least 10 years of this, so they've got some time to dial it in.
I want to move into some fun facts.
Okay.
So first of all, we talked about how this is a night race. So that eliminates two factors. One, the heat. And, even though it is in the middle of November, we are talking about Las Vegas, which is a desert where they built a bunch of buildings. So in the daylight, it still would have been hot. So it's at night, but that adds a different factor now because now they got to be able to keep those tires warm or warm them up in general. And so we're going to see a completely different outlook on the strategy in this.
This is possibly the biggest oversight of all of this. And there's a lot of oversights with this. The track layout was an oversight. Blocking literally all of the Las Vegas Strip from tourists for 6 months was an oversight, I think. Maybe they just didn't care about it. The weather. So we talked in our preview, again, a little bit about Las Vegas weather. And if you try to do this in September, October, it can be pretty hot during the days. November gets down to some reasonable numbers usually, but it can, in the daytime, trend up a little bit higher because, again, it's a desert. But what happens in deserts, as you approach the winter, nighttime, your temperature swings 60, 70 degrees sometimes.
Oh, easily.
So we're looking at, they said on-track temperature, Celsius was 4 degrees, which is roughly 39 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit is going to be the on-track temperature, with a chance of rain over the weekend. Now, Saturday night looks pretty clear, but they said Friday. So as we're practicing and qualifying, we could have some rain and 40-degree temps.
We talked about this in our video covering the Las Vegas Grand Prix of the 80s. Their on-track temperature, because it was during the day, was 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
No problem with the grip.
And the traction or the weather now
the
is going to be 30.
Tires are literally melting.
It's going to be 39, 40 now. Oh
and they literally, F1 has literally said that was not a consideration of the organizers of this race until a couple of weeks ago. And they said, here's another confusing part. Let us know in the comments if you know anything about this. They said that their tire partner, Pirelli, has been working to make sure this is a non-issue. How do you change the tire compounds that already exist? Right. I don't understand. What can you do?
Unless you bring completely new tire specs for this race alone, specifically, in which case there should already be testing involved with the other cars.
They're going to come on the broadcast for the practices, and they're going to say Pirelli out of their C0 through C6 has allocated the C3s and C4s or whatever it is. They didn't change those overnight. It's still the same C3s and 4s that we started the season with. I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't know what the whole point of that is, but you got to remember too that there are factors of this that we are still learning as we're growing in F1. So maybe there are some changes that they do bring that we're not aware of.
They're going to have Las Vegas specific tires where instead of a colored band, it's going to be the club, spades, diamonds, hearts.
Which brings me into my next point. The card suits, the clubs, the spades, the diamonds, cool. And the hearts. So if you look at the curbs in F1, typically you will see a red and white striped pattern for all the curbs and all the different tracks. For Las Vegas, they are putting the different suits on those little squared off sections. So as you go around the track, you will see clubs, spades, hearts, and diamonds. I think that looks pretty sweet.
There's a lot of cool things about this race. Don't get us wrong. We're kind of bashing the track layout without knowing too much about it. It's still going to look really good.
Oh, yeah.
And now, granted, if the cars are going high speed around these curb sections, which I saw them mostly in chicanes, which is good, right? It's not the whole track that they did in that, I don't think.
I'm not aware.
I could be surprised. The videos that we saw, they were specifically pointing them out.
But that red and white sections on curbs, they don't have around all of the tracks anyway. Right. It's only really in the turns.
That's true. So maybe if they're going around a chicane rather slow, maybe around the sphere section, which is going to be a slower section, you'll be able to see that on TV. So be looking at the curves. They're kind of cool looking.
Yeah. We have a start time in Vegas of 10 p.m. local time, which for us means midnight, but for our European fans, that's going to be about 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So they're
welcome to our world.
Yeah, but they're doing it on Saturday night, which for y'all will be Sunday morning, and they do that specifically so that we can catch that European market, because typically with an American race, they will be having to stay up or wake up or stay up super, super late just to watch the race.
And so here's the other reason they did it. COTA usually starts in the afternoon for us, like 2 to 4 o'clock, which does make it, 8 to midnight somewhere over in Europe. Okay, that's fine. But Vegas can't be a 2 p.m. race. No. You don't get Vegas at 2 p.m.
No.
You get Vegas at 10 p.m. to midnight.
Yeah, that's when Vegas starts.
And now, granted, it's not going to be, crazy wild Las Vegas Strip, but that's when the lights are happening. That's when the stuff is going off. The sights and the sounds are there. You wouldn't get that at 2 p.m.
Right, and they have to make the sphere look as good as possible, and you can see the sphere the best at night.
It looks kind of good in the day too.
It's just they're so bright, those lights that they have surrounding it. The entire track is covered in lights. Speaking of. So it's going to be like a Singapore feel, or it's going to be like an Abu Dhabi feel where they have the lights that are completely surrounding it. I like that, especially, I mean, it's needed for the track, but I like that because it adds a certain ambiance. Like if you're watching the onboards of a camera and it's just lights on the track and it's the spotlights on you, it's a cool effect.
The only thing, okay, I love street races, love street circuits. You know, you mentioned a couple, Singapore, Jeddah especially is my favorite track. And it is you're closed into a 2 or 3 lane section and you have the lights shining down on you. The only thing that I feel like street circuits distract from is the outer barricades and the fences that they do. It's a little unappealing.
Yeah, and that leads for horrible runoff sections if you can't stay on the track.
I do love the part about the wide open racing circuit where you have grass or sand or gravel off to the side. The only bad part about the street circuit is it's literally road, 2 concrete barriers, metal fence.
He's a Zandvoort man.
So it'll still look cool, but you're going to be, if they show a driver on board or something like that, it's going to be a lot of looking through the fences at the sites, not just the sites.
I want to get into how much of a hassle this was for the people that live in Las Vegas. First of all, the entire place has been under construction since like summer of last year.
Months,
dude.
If not a year.
So maybe it was summer of this year when it started.
They probably started building the permanent structures about a year ago.
Right.
But the temporary structures like 6 months ago.
And the permanent structures, those are going to be like, they bought a parking lot that was an unused abandoned parking lot. It was like somewhere around $250 million, which is ridiculous, but whatever. I digress. They bought that section so that they could put the permanent paddock boxes, which is cool because they'll have the biggest garages of any other track on the F1 calendar. So that'll be a spectacle in itself, as well as the suites that are above the pits so that you can actually look down on the track and look down on the pit stops, which is also a cool feature.
They have to have somewhere to put all the space heaters.
Right. But they have this, so they have that pit lane and that whole first section of the track that's going to go in that parking lot. And then the rest is street circuit. I mean, that's the really only purpose-built part of the track.
And I think that part is permanent, the paddock structure and the garages and all that, because that's in that parking lot you mentioned. Here's where we get a little weird, though. So like Jeremiah mentioned, they've been inconveniencing the residents and tourists of Las Vegas for months now. They just built grandstands all up and down the Strip. And if you've ever been to the Las Vegas Strip, you know that it's wide for what it is, right? Because it's a boulevard. But there's not a lot of room off to the sides because it is hotels, casinos, buildings.
Right.
So they literally built grandstands over walkways, over parts of the road. They built grandstands over the Bellagio fountains.
Right. And the funny part about these walkways that go over the tracks.
Oh, the public city-owned walkways.
They've got these big glass panels as per all the normal walkways in Vegas that go over the roads.
To let you see Vegas.
Right. So these big glass panels, except one problem. They're all frosted. They all have a film that goes over them so that you cannot see because you are not a paying viewer of the F1 race.
So what do the Vegas folks do? They just go and peel off the film that Vegas put over. And then I saw most recently, as of last week, do you know how F1 combated that?
What'd they do?
They just put up metal fences over they refilmed the walkways and they put up metal barricades over the fence. So now you can't physically reach the window.
It's definitely, I don't want to go as far as calling it a money grab because we will definitely get to see some good racing, I think, just because of the fact that the weather is going to be low, so all the strategy is going to be out the window. We might see some spectacles in the fact that no driver has been here before and raced here, so we will see some overtaking or maybe some crashes that we wouldn't normally see. So we might see like a Williams in the top 5 or something like that, just random. But it is a money grab in a sense that, I mean, even so, all of these hotels that have a view, all these casinos that have a view of the track, they're paying a premium to keep that view. If one of the hotels didn't want to pay that premium, they just put up a big Rolex sign right in front of the view so you can't see anything. You can't see any of the track.
Here's what I think they should have done. So with the Vegas walkways, don't put the film up because that's a bad look. It makes you look tacky. What you do is, now you can't close them either because they're public walkways.
Right.
So what you do is, I think you hire a police or security detail and you let a certain number of people cross the walkway at a time. That way people, like 500 people don't stack up on the walkway at once to watch a race, and you keep somebody up there to keep traffic moving.
Right.
And that way somebody can walk across, take a quick glimpse of the race, and then keep on moving.
I don't think it needs to be like a certain amount of people allowed on the bridge at once, but like maybe like a time limit. Like if they've noticed you've been standing there for a while, it's like, okay, man, let's keep it moving.
You just have somebody up there kind of directing traffic.
Right.
And because you can't charge for it either, which that's why Formula One blocked it off, because they can't charge for people to enter the public walkway. But you do something where you allow it, but you also don't set you can't just say, oh, all of our public walkways are going to be open like normal, because then you'll have 500 people rush to the edge of a bridge to try and watch a race and fight for position, which you don't want that either.
The construction.
Yeah.
The construction of this track has led many people to be so mad, man. I mean, we saw reports that there's gas stations and little corner shops and stuff like that are down millions of dollars in annual sales just because of the fact that people can't get to them. They can't access it. There's all this construction. They block off this entrance. They block off that exit. Can't go down this road now. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah. We had a buddy that lived out in Vegas, and he was saying that they've essentially just blocked everything off, and the traffic was horrible. The city was not operating like Vegas was. So if you took a trip recently to Vegas as a tourist, sorry.
Right. And now you would think, okay, now the race is over. Now it's business as usual. No, they've got to tear all that down, because it is temporary. There's only a section of it that's permanent, so they have to tear all this down, which that's going to take in itself a few weeks, if not months, for them to be able to pull all of it down and move the material.
And the other thing is, so some of it's permanent, some of it's temporary. Obviously, they have to get all the stuff on the actual strip down. But like you're saying, how long does that take? How much more of an inconvenience is? And then when do they start doing this again next year?
Right. Well, like, I mean, I'm assuming they don't have to start in the middle of or beginning of summer next time.
Right. They should do it faster. Because now they have a system.
Right. So they could probably wait later in the year.
But for the next 10 years, I think this is going to be a solid 2-month inconvenience on Las Vegas.
More than likely.
Which is huge.
Yeah, which is terrible, because businesses are going to lose money. And
this is their prime season, like fall and spring, when it's not 1,000 degrees.
Yeah. As a man that's been to Vegas, I could say you would much rather go when it's
October,
a lot cooler
November.
outside than when it's super hot outside.
Man, that's going to be tough.
I want to get into the actual racing. I kind of touched on this with the fact that the track's going to be colder, so we're going to see some anomalies out there. But I want to dive more into that. We see cars like Williams. We see cars like Ferrari who have that high-end speed. But we also have the unknown aspect of what this track is going to hold. I mean, we heard Max talking about how he is only in the F1 game. That's the only kind of track time he's had. And he said he spent more time hitting walls than going straight.
Oh.
Now, that's probably not going to be the case for Mr. Verstappen when the race actually comes, as he's a perfectionist. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be like that for everybody else. So we might see like Ferraris out of the mix, or I just threw that name out there, throw anybody in, McLaren, Mercedes, and we might see some of the lower end cars, the AlphaTauris, maybe the Williams, the Alfa Romeo, we might see them up towards the front. We're just going to see a hodgepodge here because, like, for example, let's take Alfa Romeo. You've got Zhou Guanyu, who's been in the sport for a few years now. We've got Valtteri Bottas, who's been in the sport for quite a while now. He's got the experience on these tracks. They have the same amount of experience on this Las Vegas track. So what are we going to see? We might see Zhou Guanyu like 7 positions up on Bottas, or vice versa.
There's another angle to that too. So we talked about the short run up to turn 1, right? Someone's going to bog down off the line. Someone's going to get a good jump. You're going to have somebody propel into the top 5 or 6 that isn't supposed to be in the top 5 or 6.
I love it.
You might have someone spin off the track at turn 1, and we might have a red flag right at the jump, and then immediately you've had people change positions going into a restart of the race. There's a very high likelihood we have a safety car red flag off of the turn 1 at this. Super high likelihood.
I want to see it.
Now, what that does is what Jeremiah's hinting at, which is it causes some kind of chaos to where the natural balance of the Formula One standings gets thrown off, right? Now, we're not saying Max Verstappen's going to lose, anything like that, but there's a higher chance at an unknown. So, 1, this is an unknown track, right. And 2, it's kind of an unstable track.
Yeah, it's completely, there's no rubber on it yet.
The weather, there's no sprint weekend. There's no any other series. There's no, Formula 2 race happening here, I don't think, or anything like that. So everything that they do, practice, quality, and race, is going to be fresh rubber. And if it rains Friday night or Saturday morning like they think, it's a brand new track when they go out to race Saturday night.
Yeah, no rubber, completely empty.
They're just going to be spinning their wheels. And
I like it, though.
Slamming into walls.
I like it when you don't know what to expect going into a race weekend. I love that because we do get to see spectacles out there that we wouldn't normally see.
We just want to see China so bad.
Right. Let's get into some predictions. We talked about how this isn't a sprint race weekend.
No.
So it's going to be 3 practice sessions, your qualifying, and then your race. Now, the practice sessions for 1 and 2 are going to be on a Thursday. Your practice 3 and qualifying is going to be on Friday, and then your actual race on Saturday. But with the 3 practice sessions, what does that always tell us? Red Bull will be just fine.
Yeah.
Because they typically, the only time they ever struggle is when there's 1 practice session and the rest is parfirme, sprint race, and then the actual race itself.
And we don't usually, so we've had in the past couple of weeks with the sprint format, someone usually going out in the formation lap or the first couple laps of the race with some kind of technical difficulty.
Right.
They should have all that worked out with
Oh,
the practice.
yeah, all the bugs, everything. Which leads me to why I set who I set in my top 3.
Okay,
You ready for this? Number 1, Max Verstappen. Got to give it to him. He's going to win. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I accept that. That's greatness. But number 2, give me Charles Leclerc. I think the Ferraris are going to be smoking on this track. So give me Charles Leclerc for the 2 spot.
Interesting.
Ready for this? Number 3.
Valtteri Bottas.
No. Number 3, give me Carlos Sainz. I think it's going to be a Red Bull Ferrari 2-3. And the reason I say that is because the Ferraris have shown insane pace. Now, given that Charles Leclerc will make it to the starting grid, that's got to happen first. The Ferraris got to finish the race. But given that they finished the race and what we've seen from them in these low downforce tracks, I say Ferrari 2-3. Mercedes doesn't have those low downforce packages. McLaren, we see greatness from them, and they're going to have a lot of speed, but I don't think they're going to be able to match the Ferrari straights.
Do you have Leclerc over Sainz?
I do, and the only reason why is because Leclerc's been dogging, he's been stressing, but we have seen good pace from him when he is in the race.
Okay, ready for mine?
Let's hear it.
Give me Max Verstappen with the win.
Okay.
I think I tried a couple weeks ago to predict against him. You just can't.
You put the asterisk.
And he's my favorite driver, but you just can't predict against the guy. He's too good. I almost went Ferrari 2-3.
Ooh.
But there's something I'm going to refer back to. Give me Carlos Sainz in the 2 spot.
Yes. I love that.
He just has finished higher than Charles on average this year.
I love Carlos.
For the number 3 spot, Sergio Perez.
Ooh, the return of Checo.
We saw
in Brazil.
We saw decent pace in Brazil. We've seen good drives out of him all year outside of qualifying. He's had really good recovery drives. He's won 2 races earlier this year.
Yeah, at the beginning.
Gotten second quite a bit earlier in the year. But he's back to form. And like Jeremiah mentioned, with the full slate of practices and quali, and with this being a new track, I think Red Bull's the team that just figures things out. And so you put Max 1, you put Sergio 3. I think that's a fair spread for Red Bull. I'm not going to say Sergio's going to get 2, although he could, because the race that I'm leaning back on is the Italian Grand Prix, Monza, where in that race this year, we had Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Leclerc.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want to say that I nailed Leclerc at 2 and I nailed Sainz at 3. It was one of those internal battles for me where I didn't really know who I wanted to put there because we have seen consistency from Sainz this year, but that we haven't seen from Charles Leclerc. We've seen a little daredevil in Charles Leclerc. We have seen him struggling to get to grips with this Ferrari car versus Carlos Sainz, who's pretty much nailed the car every single weekend. So it was tough for me to pick who I wanted here, but I think that Charles Leclerc, first of all, I personally see him as the faster driver in the sense of last year and the year before. He just has great speed, but he's been struggling, and I think he's starting to figure things out with the car, which leads me to bring his speed back from previous seasons.
So I contemplated, too, the whole Hamilton and Norris discussion because they could be up there as well.
Right.
I rule out Norris just because I don't think we've seen enough out of McLaren of late to beat out a fully functioning Red Bull and a fast top-speed Ferrari. I think the Ferrari still beats the McLaren in a drag race, which is essentially is. The Hamilton side of things, boy, they looked bad in Brazil.
That tire deck was
not
terrible.
The same Mercedes that we've seen the first 2/3 of the year. That was awful.
Yeah, from both of them.
Something is wrong at Mercedes, and I don't think that helps them this. Now, not to say they don't finish, one of them doesn't finish in the top 5 or so, but I don't think we see a podium for Mercedes this week.
Okay, what do you expect to see besides the Mercedes thing you just listed?
Yep.
What do you expect to see in this race?
Give me some chaos off the jump at turn 1. Like I said, I'm calling it safety car, red flag right off the jump. You're going to have these guys going into a very short, run up to turn 1. Somebody's going to try to make a move on the outside. Someone's going to try to make a move on the inside. You could have an Albon, Magnussen, Hulkenberg thing that we had a couple weeks ago. Some tire's going to fly off and hit Daniel Ricciardo in the back. Something's going to happen at turn 1, and it's going to shut them down, and they're going to have to restart it. I'm okay with that. That might make them end up changing some things for next year. Who knows? But I think we're going to see a safety car at turn 1. You also referenced this earlier, aligned with that whole chaos at turn 1 thing. We're going to see a lot of slipping and sliding on this track. There's no getting around it. Just the fresh rubber part alone, the fresh track and everything, that's enough. You factor in the temperature and the fact that these drivers have never been on this track before, people are going to be sliding off left and right. I would not be surprised if we finish with 15 or less drivers.
Okay. So you hit on the big points in terms of what we expect to see as far as on-track performances. So I'm going to gear my expectations for this race more towards positioning by the end of the race, where we're going to see people land. Give me Hulkenberg in the top 10 given points. The Haas are proven to do well on fast circuits. I think that they're going to do really well on this one. I think Hulkenberg's been upset because he's gotten sandwiched twice this season
Alex
now.
Albon puts his tire in his right side pod or whatever.
Brings me to my next point. Give me Albon in either the 7 or the 8 spot for the end of this race.
He just has to make it out of lap 1. If he makes it out of lap 1, I think he gets points.
Right. Now, Magnussen, I expect him to be either 11 or 12, and I expect Logan, believe it or not, to be in 11, 12, or 13. I don't expect him to be back towards the back of the grid. I think Williams has so much top speed here that he is going to have a good performance.
I'll be really honest. I can easily see Logan Sargent and Zhou Guanyu DNFing.
Slapping a wall.
They're going to be they're the beginning of the ones that run off.
And, you know,
Especially
I could see it.
Logan.
I could see it. I just hope that he pulls it together. He has the car for this track.
There's going to be a nice little DNF symbol next to his name about 5 minutes into that race.
All right. Do you have anything else?
No. So this is the penultimate?
The penultimate
race of the year. We only have one left, which is the Abu Dhabi Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, not the Abu Dhabi. So this is exciting. We're approaching the end of the year. Obviously, Max and Red Bull have run away with everything, but there are still some major financial implications on the line for our number 2 spot, which we've talked about way in depth the past couple of weeks. There's Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez. There's Mercedes, Ferrari going at it for number 2. If Ferrari does what we both kind of think that they'll do, you think that they're getting 2, 3. I think that they're getting 2 and another top 5 finish. They might beat Mercedes
in the final standings.
I mean, seriously, this is the wrong time for Mercedes to fall apart.
Yeah, especially if Mercedes, like you said, keeps on this horrible tear in this past race that they had where they aren't able to get to grips with their tires. They aren't able to get to grips with the pace of the top cars, and they just start falling back again.
And there's big money on the line for those positions. Every time you move up, like if you watch Drive to Survive, the reason that we got so interested in like the battle for 10 in a race, the battle for 9, the drivers and the teams, if you can move up literally one spot, you're talking millions of dollars difference.
Oh, easily.
For that one spot.
Let us know what you guys think. Thomas, your serious question?
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah, just give us your podium in the comments. We went Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz. I went Verstappen, Sainz, Perez. Give us your top 3.
Guys, if you think that next year and going forward they should just scrap this whole Las Vegas project and put it back in the parking lot of Caesar's Palace, I want to see that too.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye, guys.